I want to know if y'all have noticed this, but from where I'm sitting, there seems to be a blatant takeover of our natural world. And this isn't really anything new. This has been going on for a while now, but it seems like this is accelerating. And it's kind of crazy because this is happening at a time where people are trying to get back to that kind of lifestyle. Because I think our world is getting so noisy that people are just kind of tired of it. And we have more and more people, I would say millions of people now, that are trying to get back to the basics, the fundamentals of life. And that just kind of means, getting back to nature, being self-reliant and self-sufficient, growing your own food, and doing whatever we can to become more independent. Because in our modern world, it's really no secret, but we're very reliant on big industry. We're reliant on these corporations. And I would say we're actually kind of reliant on our government. We turn to our government and we turn to these corporations and these industries for a lot of stuff. We turn to them to answer our questions and solve our problems. We turn to them for food, shelter, water. All these things we turn to them for. And that's a really scary thing, because I read a statistic not too long ago that said that back in the 1950s, that over 50% of the people in the United States grew and produced their own food. Today, that number is 0.1%. And if you really think about it, how many of us are actually completely self-reliant? How many of us can actually say that we grow and produce enough food to sustain us for most of the year? It's a very, very small amount. And I think a lot of people are realizing the kind of precarious situation that we found ourselves in by being that reliant on something that is not ourselves. So, like I said, people are trying to get back to that. And I think in a very large way, people are just trying to find peace, because that's one thing that's becoming very, very scarce today. And when you adopt a more basic, simple lifestyle and you get back to nature and you start doing things for yourself, it's a very good way to find peace. But now, those of us that are actually living that kind of life, and I would say those of us that are trying to get into living that kind of life, we're now finding ourselves fighting for our lives. We're fighting for that lifestyle, to maintain it, to make sure that it's not stripped from us, because it really seems like that's what's happening. And this becomes very apparent when you just look around and observe the things that are happening around us. Because one of the big things that's happening is we have all these data centers that are being built, and they're taking up massive swaths of farmland. This is fertile soil that we will never get back. And it's not just data centers. We're talking about pretty much all development. Just as the song goes, we're paving paradise and we're putting up parking lots. That's exactly what's happening. And it's not just happening here and there. It's happening at a massive scale all over the country. And just to put things into perspective, in 2025 alone, we lost 15,000 farms here in the U.S. And bankruptcies for farms increased 46% in 2025 alone. These are scary statistics, but this is the reality that we're facing. And one of the major reasons for this is simply because the cost of everything keeps going up. It's very hard for most people to make ends meet today, and that is especially true for people that live off the land, for people that farm and have livestock and agriculture and grow and produce their own food, because all of these things cost money. And it's not just that the land costs money and feed costs money and all that stuff. You have to factor in maintenance and fuel, energy, and literally everything. Just the price of everything is going up. So people can't keep up. And I often ask myself, where are the subsidies for these people? Where are the incentives for people to live this kind of life? And why aren't we encouraged to do this? Because you would think that if you wanted to have a strong population and a strong country, you would want to do everything that you possibly could to make sure that those people are self-reliant, that they are independent, that they can produce their own food, and that it's not going to break the bank in order for them to live that life. Because in my eyes, and what common sense would tell me, is that if you have a population that doesn't have to rely on its own government, and it doesn't have to rely on external factors and corporations and big industry, and it can provide for itself. It can grow and produce its own food. It can make its own money by selling that food back to, other people in the community. That is going to be a very, very strong populace and a very independent populace. One that you probably don't have to worry about. So I think it's high time that we start asking these very difficult questions and ask ourselves, why don't they? Why don't they incentivize us to live this way? Why don't they make it easier for us to live this way? Why isn't it encouraged? These are all very good questions, and I've taken a lot of time to really think about this and dig into it. And I can tell you that once you do, these questions, they start to answer themselves. And the answers start to become very apparent once you really start thinking about what this kind of lifestyle offers, what it gives you, what it gives us, the people. And I can tell you from my experience, because I've been living this way pretty much my entire life, that what it gives you is absolutely invaluable. Because not only does it give you the ability to generate your own income, because you can actually grow your own food and you can sell that food back to the community. I mean, we see this stuff happening all the time. I was watching a YouTube video just a couple weeks ago about this family that was farming 1 acre of land, and they were making $13,000 a week because their land is that productive. So that's just one thing it can give you. But I don't necessarily make my land productive so that I can make money off of it, because what it gives me is something much, much greater than any dollar amount. What it gives me is purpose and fulfillment. It gives me independence. It gives me peace, because there's something that's very, very meaningful deep down on a raw and primal fundamental level about working with your hands, tending to the land, and literally reaping the fruits of your labor. And that's coming from somebody who worked almost 20 years in the corporate industry, and I gave all of that up so that I could live this kind of lifestyle. Because what I realized from working 20 years in the corporate world is that, yes, I love my job. Yes, it gave me the money and the financial freedom to do the things in life I wanted to do. But it also took away all of my time. And what is all that money worth if you don't have time to enjoy it? What are all the things worth? What is all the stuff worth if you can't enjoy it? Eventually, I discovered the answer to that question. And for me personally, the answer to it was that true wealth is not necessarily monetary. Yes, money can bring you a lot of good things in life. Yes, it can bring you freedom, but money will only get you so far. And in order to get all the other things out of life, and I would say the other things being the things that are more meaningful, you have to dig a little deeper than that. And I have found that living this kind of lifestyle, getting back to the basics and the fundamentals of life, is a very easy way to do that. So in answering the question about why concrete and electronics and servers and parking lots are more important than encouraging people to be independent and self-sufficient and self-reliant, I think all we have to do is look at the deeper meaning behind this. What does living this way give us? And how much better off would we be if everyone was encouraged to live this way? Because it seems to me that they don't want us to be self-reliant. They don't want us to be reliant on something that is not them. Because greed has a stranglehold on society. The only thing they care about is profit. The only thing they care about is control. And when we don't live this way, and we can't provide for ourselves, they have profit and they have control. Because when you control the food, you control the people. When you control basically every aspect of our lives, you control the people. And when you do away with the natural world, and you make us reliant on everything else besides ourselves, you've just won. You now have complete control. When you control access and options, you have a monopoly over the people. Doesn't that sound like modern society? Isn't that the world that we're living in today? I think that it is. And I also believe that because greed has taken precedence over pretty much everything else, that they have realized that the people that do not fall into that category and that are self-reliant, they're a threat to everything. They're a threat to the system and the entire cabal. Because if you had a population that was not reliant on them, that entire system collapses. Their revenue stream collapses. Their control collapses, and therefore their power collapses. That is exactly why the natural world is under attack. That is why they don't care about destroying our natural environment, paving paradise, and putting up parking lots. It is because they know when they do that, they benefit from it. And with all that said, what do? How do we fight back against this? Because it seems to me that we really don't have anybody in our corner fighting for us. I ask myself all the time, where are all these environmental activists? You know, they're screaming about protecting the environment and conserving wildlife and all this stuff when it's convenient for them, when there's money involved. But when it comes to bettering the people, you don't hear a peep out of them. So apparently we can't rely on them. We definitely can't rely on our government. We can't rely on the industries or the corporations, so who else is there? It's just us. We have to look to ourselves to solve these problems. And I would say maybe the way to do that is to just never stop fighting. If you've been thinking about getting into homesteading or farming or trying to be self-sufficient and self-reliant, now's the time. The price of land's not going to go down anytime soon. Actually, it's never going to go down. It's only going to continue to go up. So I would say if you want to buy land, I would do it before we're priced completely out of it. And I think it's also very important to understand and realize that you don't need a ton of land. You don't have to have 100 acres. You can be more self-sufficient just by growing vegetables and stuff on your back patio. Get some backyard chickens if you have a backyard. And if you simply don't have the space or the resources to do any of those things, you can always support a farmer. Buy your food from a local producer. And these aren't just businesses. These are our neighbors. These are people just like you and I. These are the hardworking men and women that are the backbone of this country. And with every single one that we lose, we become more and more reliant on the stuff that we're trying to avoid, on the people that have their boot heel on our neck and that aren't letting up. And if you're looking for local farms and local producers in your area, I'm going to put a link in the description below to a farm map that I created. There are over 7,200 listings on that farm map. It's free to use. Browse it and see if you can find a local producer in your area. Source your food from them as often as you can. And in addition to that, I think it's also very important to just be vocal about this stuff. We have to make sure our voices are heard. Make sure that we don't agree with all of this concrete being put up around us. Make sure that we let these people know that we don't agree with our natural world being destroyed and being displaced. We don't agree with us being displaced. And we also don't agree with having our food sovereignty. And I would say our sovereignty and independence and our freedoms stripped from us. And for our sake, and for the sake of our future generations, we have to make sure that these people hear our message and that they never forget it.